Hello and good evening. I am Mamudu Gajaga and this is QTV News coming to you live from our studios along Caraba Avenue. Thank you for joining us. First, here are the main news headlines. The National Assembly on Monday approved the 2022 estimates of revenue and expenditure with changes that make close to $58 million saving to be reallocated to ministries, other institutions and health and social programs. The West African Network for Peace Building, WANEB, through its project Strengthening Multi-Stakeholders Responses to Election Violence in West Africa, on Tuesday began a 3-day training course on election security for civil society organizations. In a related activity, WANEB, in partnership with the Interior Ministry, on Monday validated the project document and standard operating procedure for operationalization and establishment of the Gambia infrastructure for peace in the country. How many of us still wear tie and dye garments? We look at why the craft and the trade are in danger of disappearing. In sports news, joy for the Gambia women's footballers as they eliminate Sierra Leone in the AFCON qualifiers. Those were the main news headlines, and now the news in detail. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is QTV News. The National Assembly on Monday approved the 2022 estimates of revenue and expenditure with changes that make close to $58 million saving to be reallocated to ministries, other institutions and health and social programs. Mamudu Lamin Choi has more.
The National Assembly is sitting as a committee of supply, also known as the Committee of the Whole House, to consider the estimates of revenue and expenditure. The NAMS had adopted the report of findings and recommendations of the Finance and Public Accounts Committee, consolidated from reports of Assembly committees who had scrutinized and considered the budget with ministries. At the Committee of Supply, National Assembly members scrutinized the estimates of revenue and expenditure with consideration of the recommendations of the Finance and Public Accounts Committee's report and proposals for amendments from members.
Well, I'm thinking because clothing is a durable item, if they spent $3 million on gowns last year, I wonder why they should spend more, up to $4.5 million. My proposal is that we maintain the $3 million that was given last year, and then the savings we are going to make, well, I know where to put it. Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education needs $185 million. We can send it to Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education.
The NAMS amended the budget estimates by slashing budget line items of ministries and state institutions, mostly on recurrent expenditure, while leaving some unchanged. Present in this budget session is the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, who had tabled the 2022 budget estimates of $29.87 billion. The Minister's intermittent intervention in this session, when sought for by the Assembly, is to explain or justify budget estimates of ministries.
All that I can confirm is whatever we have come up with here, that's the information we have. Maybe as honorable member from Serakunda, it can come in a form of parliamentary question, but up to today, we have not received that submission attaching the audited accounts.
After cutting budget items from ministries and other state institutions, the result is savings of $58,995,000. In terms of reallocation, close to $23 million goes to national health insurance, $20 million to the Program for Accelerated Community Development, while the rest goes to the Agri Ministry, PMO, Trade Ministry, and the National Population Secretariat. The Finance Minister and Deputy Chair of the FPAC react to this year's budget session, attributing the smooth process of this year's budget session to effective communications and consultations with the executive and legislature on the budget estimates.
It is historic in the sense that once we submitted the budget, they've realized that the budget deficit has gone down, they've realized the borrowing has gone down without compromising our mission of infrastructure, our mission for energy, our mission for agriculture, education. And the fact that we are now inward looking, we are now trying to fund our own programs with our own taxpayers' money.
There's a lot of improvement compared to last year. Where last year we had a deficit of almost $6 billion, because deficit was about $5.9 billion. Now this year the ministry was able to cut the deficit further to $2.2 billion. that most of us actually think is something that the government actually can manage.
The 2022 budget estimates prioritize development expenditure on infrastructure and social services like health, education and agriculture. Having approved the budget estimates with amendments, the Assembly will convene on Thursday when the Finance Minister will deliver a budget speech and move a motion for a second reading of the appropriation bill. When approved, it will authorize government to withdraw funds from the Consolidated Fund for expenditure during the financial year as specified in the bill. Mohamed Lamin Choi, QTV News.
The West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, through its project strengthening multi-stakeholder responses to election violence in West Africa, on Tuesday began a 3-day training course on election security for civil society organizations. Our reporter Omar P. Jallo attended the opening ceremony and he files in this report.
Over the past decade, the political landscape in West Africa had witnessed considerable progress in consolidating democratic governance. This is evident by the increasing space for citizen participation in the governance and decision-making process through multi-party elections and peaceful transition of power in some countries including the Gambia, Benin, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Niger, Nigeria and Senegal. As recently as last week, the presidential election in Gambia's near neighbor Cape Verde, which saw the opposition Trump, was held by ECOWAS as an example for all of Africa. Electoral violence in Guinea-Conakry and Ivory Coast reminds us not to take things for granted. At the opening, the WANEP liaison coordinator at ECOWAS in Abuja, Mensa Dede Edwin, said despite the successes, the electoral cycle remains fragile and continues to replete with tensions and violence across the sub-region. Thus the importance of this training and call on participants to effectively participate in the discussions.
Today we can say we can justify those violence by the fact that we do not have the necessary knowledge, or there is a lack of knowledge that led to those actions of violence in the country or in the region. For that region, we are now trying to see how we can improve or strengthen the knowledge of the civil society for them to also act on the ground or able to mitigate those problems when they arise.
Representing the National Network Coordinator of WANEP the Gambia, Mamadou Ba, the National Early Warning System Manager with WANEP the Gambia, welcomed the timing of the training as it provides an opportunity for a proactive multi-stakeholder response that integrates state and civil society collaboration for an effective election dispute management as well as the consolidation of democracy and good governance.
The wealth of experience gathered at this training will provide opportunities for the proactive participation of civil society organizations to contribute efficiently to the prevention and mitigation of threats to the peaceful conduct of the December 4th presidential elections.
The training is expected to deepen the knowledge and skills of the participants in promoting peaceful, credible and inclusive participations of citizens in multi-party democratic elections to contribute effectively to the prevention and mitigation of threats to peaceful and credible conduct of elections in December 2021 here in the Gambia. Reporting for KTV News, I am Omar P. Jallo.
In a related activity, the West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, in partnership with the Interior Ministry on Monday, validated the project document and standard operating procedure for the operationalization and establishment of the Gambia infrastructure for peace in the country. Loli M. Camara reports.
It is expected the validated document will guide and improve peace building and conflict intervention processes in the Gambia. The discussion leading to the validation brought together stakeholders, including civil society organizations and representatives from the Technical Working Group on Gambia Infrastructure for Peace, amongst others. Salaman Jai, National Network Coordinator, WANEP the Gambia, said, even though there have been achievements in the security and civil service reform, the country still faces internal challenges which threaten the peace and security. She then outlined how to address these challenges.
These challenges will require a participatory, inclusive and transformative approach on the part of national actors with sustained support from development partners, as the consolidation of peace and democratic reforms in the country likely depends on a stakeholder approach, and long-term strategies through a national peace architecture.
On behalf of his minister, Asan Tangara, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Interior, said it is hoped that Infrastructure on Peace will provide measures for peacemaking platform during community outreach programs. He added that the document will help guide the peace building and conflict intervention in the Gambia.
The SOP will direct the needs for conflict resolution mechanism and activities for more community stabilizations within domain of social, political, and economic sphere of our dear nation.
Alhaji Babukar Cham, the chairman of the Technical Working Group on Infrastructure for Peace, on behalf of his members, thanked the Ministry of Interior, WANEP the Gambia, and other partners for validating such an important document.
For the entire membership of the Technical Working Group on Infrastructure for Peace, but also for officials and all other stakeholders to think objectively, but also to analyze fairly, to prevent and respond adequately, but also communicate effectively and develop the culture of dialogue on the prevention, management of resolution of all crises.
UNDP country representative Aissata Day and Claude Condor, ECOWAS political advisor to the special representative of the president of ECOWAS to the Gambia respectively, both stated the need to have such a document.
It is common knowledge that society resilience to violent conflict, and those where different groups can constructively interact with one another to address potential cause of tension, such as socio-economic, political, ethnic, and religious differences for unequal resources allocation.
As already underscored by the resident representative of UNDP, prevention is better than cure. And therefore, ECOWAS believes in conflict prevention and peace building.
This project document is the outcome of extensive consultations with stakeholders, including the Technical Working Group, political parties, traditional rulers, religious organizations, women groups, youth leaders, community-based associations, ministries of interior and youth, and other state and non-state actors. Now it has been validated. It is hoped it will be used as a guide in the implementation of peace. For QTV News, Lolly M. Camara.
From that report by Lolly M. Camara, that will take us to a commercial break. And when we return, we still have some more news for you. Do stay tuned.
Gambia OIC Secretariat in the Ministry of Works and the National Roads Authority wolle ko be bere lala kala membe kala tariko ti nyimbanko kan pour ka datir ke 50 km urban road project ola wala mu ibe silolu menu di dala ko mbokono anu o dalolla e ko nyimbere labe kala burfut sata wala kono ila football filoto abe kala arabalu ngo october karotili muwang ani woro wala be datla talantan kilin somandal andu nyindabe kafuring do ko lela e nyanta menkela pour OIC me yalon ko nyanta jiala jang 2022 bengo memba nyaton ka yala wala na banko le president bati his excellency Adama Barrow anala man sakunda be anda nata ke moti menson ta pour kanyum be nyaton kaya kadati ke doku wala membe kelen na tundo ka me yalon ko membita fo silamu wang ibe wala doku lali nyin silamu wang bebe doku la OIC la nyin 50 km road project ko koto me yalon ko na pareta abe lampo du sota la kartanta wala jibor silol be tan laje ani mol be kan la tamala damen nyin silol be doku te pareta ibe na traffic ko la deto talala ibe fironi sandiro yuru wande la na banko kan andi be banko fango mulungo nyinyandi la bakele.
Welcome back and thank you very much if you're just joining us. This is QTV News. Tie and dye, locally called chube in the Gambia, has been a fashion and trade for many years. However, recently the glory seems to have faded for this brightly colored fabric. To find out why, our reporter Ajibintu Drame went to Dipakunda, Tube Town, to speak to people involved in this ancient trade.
Tie-dye has been an Asian craft across the world, and there are records as far back as the 6th century from China and Japan depicting this. Tie-dyeing is practiced as an Asian craft in many African countries, with traditions handed down over centuries. In early times, people used natural dyes from berries, leaves, roots and flowers to color the cloth. Here in the Gambia, people use color nuts to give the fabric a brilliant orange color. Tie-dye is described as a pattern of color made by preventing the dye from reaching some areas of the fabric while dyeing others, to give beautifully crafted patterns. There are various stages involved in the process, from folding, tying, stitching, crumpling, soaking, drying and lastly, tapping to give the fabric a sheen and a fine finishing touch ready for the market. Some of the reasons people buy tie-dye are because of its affordability and uniqueness. Nowadays, modern tie-dye is on a completely different level, from wide range of colors and styles on caps, brightly colored t-shirts, drapes, bed sheets, among other uses in the fashion world. The handmade version of this style finds itself in competition with a mass-produced imported version. Fatou Fode Drame makes a variety of fabrics such as tie-dye, batik and others. She explains she inherited the skills from her parents, which is a tradition.
Bujeka, sunu mami ak sunu yaay ñoy cuub ñom cuub bu ñuul bi leen do cuub mo nekk ni suñu cuubee lii bujeka samba kuka lañ jël kuka du basse sax samba kuka loolu de cuub ñu yob ko jaay ci dëkk bi.
Previously, our grandparents and our mothers were involved in tie-dye. They used the black dye and a fabric called samba kuka, which they made and sold. Now we use mbaseng. Previously, tube was a lucrative business, but now these latest fabrics like jasna and venkir have really slowed down the pace of our business. She gives her view on why she thinks the tie-dye business is not booming as it used to. That is how I see it. Since the fabric from China started coming in, our business has been slow. Another reason is that people will go to Mali and Dakar to buy it from there. But theirs is not more beautiful than ours. We only lack materials, and the materials are expensive, and business is very slow and not profitable. Fatou calls for help in terms of materials for quality and large production, as happens in other counterparts. She adds that this is their livelihood and keeping the tradition alive is also important. After all the processes to give the fabric an outstanding and brilliant color, it is then taken for tapping or beating to add the finishing touches. Suleiman Jallo, a craftsman who has been in the business for 8 years, says nowadays fewer contracts are given to him, adding that things have been difficult.
Since the Chinese and the Indians started importing, that's when the tie-and-dye business fell in the Gambia, and it has affected our work here. The business is at a standstill.
For decades, this beautifully crafted color cloth was once worn by many, especially on special occasions. Now the homegrown, handmade version is seen less and less. In neighboring Cape Verde, when they realized similar traditional crafts were in danger of dying out, they introduced them into the school curriculum, and now those crafts and the skills associated with them are thriving again. If we in the Gambia don't embrace, cherish tube as part of our heritage worth preserving, it will vanish forever. As you watch or listen to this broadcast, ask yourself, what can I do to help preserve this great tradition? Ajibintu Drame, QTV News.
Well, those fabrics really look beautiful, and I think we should preserve it. Tie-dye, or if you're from the Gambia, tie and dye. Next is sports. In sports, Gambia's women footballers are rejoicing after holding on to make it to the next round of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers. They held on in the second leg of the qualifiers to eliminate Sierra Leone. More in this report. The female Scorpions made it through after holding a spirited challenge against Sierra Leone. Although they had triumphed 2-0 in the first leg, which had to be played in Monrovia, Liberia, the female Scorpions were determined not to be complacent, as they knew they would have a tough game on their hands. In that game, second-half goals from Ola Buaro and Rugi Juve has settled the context and given Gambia a good lead to defend in the second leg. The Gambians carried where they left in the first leg, as Fatou Kante found the net in the 23rd minute. The Sierra Leoneans now had a mountain to climb and seemed to give themselves hope when Captain Zainab Macaulay scored in the 54th minute. Tried as they might, could not get back on aggregate terms. Hope was extinguished for the visitors when they had a player sent off in the 83rd minute. This seemed to knock all the spirit out of the Sierra Leonean team, and Gambia held on to progress. They already know their opponents in the next round will be Cameroon, who eliminated the Central African Republic 3-0 on aggregate. In another game on the same day, Burkina Faso eliminated Benin 5-2 on aggregate after winning 3-1 away on Monday, having won the home leg 2-1. They now await the winners of the face-off between their near neighbors Guinea-Bissau and Mauritania. The next round of qualifiers to see who makes it to Morocco for the finals will take place in July 2022. The next round of qualifiers to see who makes it to Morocco for the finals will take place in July 2022. Mamadou Gajaga, QTV News. And now let's have a look at our main news stories. The National Assembly on Monday approved the 2022 estimates of revenue and expenditure with changes that make close to $58 million in saving to be reallocated to ministries, other institutions and health and social programs. The West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, through its project Strengthening Multi-Stakeholder Responses to Election Violence in West Africa, on Tuesday began a 3-day training course on election security for civil society organizations. In a related activity, WANEP, in partnership with the Interior Ministry on Monday, validated the project document and standard operating procedure for operationalization and establishment of the Gambia infrastructure for peace in the country. How many of us still wear tie and dye garments? We looked at why the craft and the trade are in danger of disappearing. And in sports news, joy for the Gambia women footballers as they eliminate Sierra Leone in the Africa Cup of Nations women's qualifiers. Well, that's all we have for you in this news bulletin. Thank you very much for watching, but don't forget to join us at 10 for another bulletin.